TJ Kopcha here. I'm back for part 2 of prototyping. I'm just in the last segment. If you haven't seen it, you should go see it. We talked about what prototyping is, why it's important, and went through some paper or handmade prototypes, just very rough rudimentary sketches, and then showed what they actually became in the next iteration. So I just wanted to talk a little bit more now about some of the other types of prototyping that are out there, and maybe how to consider which one to go for and why. So we've got, we were talking about 3 different kinds of prototypes: paper prototypes, slideshow prototypes, and working versions of the prototype. And in the last segment, I jumped right from a paper prototype to a working version, but I did it using Google Sites, which is a really low cost and easy way of prototyping the next stage from paper to an actual web page or web-based document. If I were building in HTML, this would be a good intermediate step, almost like a slideshow is. Because I can mimic a lot of the functionality I want without taking a lot of my own time or resources to do that. So, your intermediate prototyping step between the actual working version and some kind of a crude paper prototype, it could be a variety of things. What we're going to talk about now is a slideshow, and here's one right here. So I know that this is Dr. Che's work on case-based learning, and so you can see where they've just worked up a rough layout using boxes and other what looks like a functioning web page, but it's not functioning because it's a slideshow, just to show where things might go and how they might interact, where decision points might go, where links to the case report might go, how you're going to use color to indicate, okay, I'm at this decision point, but I know that there are 5 other decision points. And just how will things be organized in the limited space that you have? Where will video go? Where will other video, like expert reasoning video, go, and things like that? So that makes a nice intermediary. If you were going to build this, let's say in Captivate or with Articulate or some other program like that, this provides a very low cost, low commitment step into the right direction so that you can show a client what you think they're talking about, what it might look like, and they can give you feedback at a point where it costs you very little to fix a mistake or something that's wrong, versus actually going to a Captivate or an Articulate, spending hours building this, and then finding out that it's wrong. Okay? So let's talk about this. Right, so one of the things you can do with those slideshows or even paper prototypes is you can put them in front of other people, right? And then those people can tell you what they're thinking. You can say, where would you click? Okay, I click here. Oh, well, here's what would happen if you clicked here. What would you do next? And they can walk you through their thinking about the interaction and the way you have things laid out, again, without you putting all the time and investment into creating a final working prototype. Until you've got that thing, the layout and the interactions and everything else perfected, you can spend your time, less time on the technology and more time working with users and getting their interaction and their experience solid. Okay? So that's one way to prototype perhaps e-learning. Another way is with storyboards. In storyboards, there's a whole range of storyboard ideas out there, what you could draw as a storyboard. And in fact, there's several templates for storyboards on our studio website. But a storyboard is just a series of drawings or images, perhaps blended with text, that really visually communicate what you plan to have the user experience. It's both the story, but also the visuals and some of the layout that go with it. It can be rough and crude, like a hand sketch, just like this, but you get the idea. You can see where content might be here in the middle. You can see there's a navigation menu to the side. You can see in this first one how the navigation menu might pop open and where it might lead you and things like that. And then it can get more sophisticated, like a multimedia storyboard where you're describing the scene. You've got a quick, rough, hand-drawn sketch of a car here. What's going to happen where? What's the title of the screen? What's the description? You can go as far as storyboarding every screen to storyboarding a representative of a type of screen. So you might have a content screen, you might have a video screen, you might have a quiz screen, you might have, I don't know, some other kind of screen. You don't need to do every variation of those. Just each of those 4 would show someone very easily, here are the 4 major types of screens we're going to build. The words might change, the images might change, but here's what the layout would look like. Here's an example of one, and you can get a lot done, and you can get client approval very rapidly so that you're all happy as the process is moving on, instead of finding out that they're unhappy at the end. Okay? Another way of prototyping, which is sort of similar to what we saw here, except this actually mimics the screen, is with flowcharts. A flowchart is like a bird's eye view that shows the structure and sequence of the program, and that's from Alessi and Trollope. All right, and that's the book that I'm referring to as we talk about a lot of these things. But it shows in detail what the learners are going to encounter throughout the experience. It doesn't try and capture all the visual aspects of the experience, but rather the major events of the experience. And it can be a flowchart with decision points like you see right here, which is important because sometimes you don't want learners to skip an introduction like you see here. And sometimes you want to give them that option. There may come a point where they have 5 major or 6 major modules to complete, and then each of those goes somewhere else. So this is another way to communicate, not just with a client, but if you're working as a design team, but then you're going to hand your design over to some kind of a computer-related team who's going to do the programming and create the interface or work with the interface, and you may not have anything to do with that, you need to be able to communicate how those things are going to happen. And so here's one way of doing that. All right, and here's another one. I mean, these take all sorts of shapes and forms. The real key here is that prototypes should mimic the look, the feel, and the experience that you need them to, so that you can get client input and perhaps even approval early in your design, or as early as possible, so that you don't come to the end of your design and find out your client didn't like it, and then you have to change everything. So the better you get at anticipating what your client, where you and your client might not be communicating 100%, where there might be confusion, you get a prototype, you show it to your client, you get that feedback, and you can avoid a lot of headaches and hassles later on. One thing I want to point out is that early in your career as a designer, I think it's pretty typical to experience some of the problems that I'm talking about. Things that you realize later, gosh, I should have shown that to the client earlier and I didn't. And I just want to say that's all part of the learning process. So don't feel discouraged if that's what's happening. Let me go back to my video here. So yeah, I wouldn't feel discouraged if you do come to the end and you've made one of those mistakes and you find yourself investing 5 hours to fix one font or a heading, and you realize, gosh, if I had just gotten this approved in the first place, we could have avoided all this headache. Exactly. That is part of how we learn as designers. Having little failures, analyzing those failures, and learning to anticipate those failures is what makes a very competent, robust, elegant designer in the future. So as disappointing as those little slip-ups can be, or those little mistakes can be, also recognize they're an integral part of the learning process. And even I still make some of those mistakes. Very experienced designers make some of those mistakes. We just have a much bigger repertoire for dealing with those mistakes creatively, figuring out what to do with them, and making the best of them, and then anticipating them in the future than someone with very limited experience might be able to do. So good luck to you. Enjoy prototyping, because I think it's probably one of the most fun parts of the design process. It's where the rubber meets the road for the first time, and it's always exciting. So So good luck. I hope you enjoyed the video, and get to prototyping. Mogridge says, prototype early and often.